Hello and welcome to REN in Focus, a podcast brought to you by the Radicalization Awareness Network, REN Practitioners. My name is Jordi Nijnhuis, and in these new series of podcasts, we'll be taking a look at the important work that practitioners do online. With digital innovation accelerating at such a pace, the line between online and offline is becoming increasingly blurred. We're all digital now, pretty much, right? Certainly for young people who are spending more and more time online than ever before, they do not see the distinction. It has therefore never been more important for us as practitioners to engage online, whether to understand the latest digital trends, to reach and engage our audiences, or to deliver campaigns or interventions. On today's program, we're going to talk about digital youth work, and what this means in practitioner terms and how it might differ from more traditional forms of youth work. And we'll also be discussing the vast potential that digital work offers to have new experiences, new interactions, and the possibility of taking our practice in complete new directions, whether through AI, VR, the metaverse, or a host of other possibilities. To help me better understand the world of digital youth work, I am delighted to be joined by my guest today, Werner Prinzjakowitsch of the Vienna Association of Youth Centers and former REN working group lead for youth, families and communities. Werner, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for inviting me.
So to get us started, can you tell me a bit about your personal background in youth work?
This could be a long story because I started being a youth worker in the early 80s, so quite some time ago. I was a practitioner in several youth centers in Vienna, always in the same association I'm still working at. And in the youth center, it's basically an open house, therefore it's also called open youth work. So it's kind of drop-in center for young people to spend their free time.
We're here as REN practitioners, of course. So can you tell me a bit about the link to PCVE in that sense?
Youth work, in the way we do it, is a very low threshold approach. So you predominantly reach young people that are not reached by other municipal services. It's those youngsters who do not have the economic background, maybe also not the educational background. So it's not only, but predominantly those youngsters who just hang around and do not really know or would not really know what to do with the free time, might otherwise hang around on the street. So by that, we are reaching a very specific target group.
So that's really primary prevention work you do.
It's definitely primary prevention work.
So you were kind of an early adapter for this technology, I feel. What kind of things or impact did you see by this mass or rapid development of tech, maybe on young people, but also on organizations?
I think the most interesting and important thing for me still is the rapid development itself.
And we're still in it, right?
We're still in it, so
it's moving,
it's not finished. For sure, we have not reached any point where we can say, okay, now we are there and now we can adapt. It's a permanent adaptation. Like all the way how communication is going, how youngsters are flooded with a certain type of information, with fast information, short information.
So you mean more like the TikTok style of communication,
Definitely,
short video clips?
Definitely, short clips, a lot of clips, and be permanently ready.
So it feels like you've got really taps on that online world. You see what's happening there. Do you also feel like with that development of these online spaces that PCVE work has changed?
It has changed in a way that you definitely need to involve the online work in any general PCVE strategy you would develop, because the majority of communication, not only for young people, but specifically for young people, is via the online world. That's the way to get information for them.
And do you think that's maybe a blind spot for many practitioners?
I don't think so. My impression is in all the networks I'm involved in nowadays, the online component is always present. The challenge at the moment is that no one hasn't yet developed a recipe or not even a strategy against what's going on. I think the current online interventions, specifically when it comes to PCV, are small drops on a quite hot stone. My impression is no one dares to invest time and money, what else, into developing something. On the other hand, no one yet came up with the wonderful idea how to do it. Of course, nobody dares to promise because it's experiment.
Yeah, of course. But I do feel the way you embrace digital youth work as an organization could maybe function as like a template for different cities or different organizations. So can you maybe walk me a bit through what it looks like in reality? How do you put this into practice as an organization?
As we were saying earlier, we are working in primary prevention, which is the most underestimated part of PCVE prevention from my personal point of view, both offline and also online. What I think is important is to be, when it comes to young people specifically, to be where the young people are. And that means you have to be at the platforms where they are. You have to follow, or for us, it's clear that we have to follow certain rules, like to be transparent, to make clear who we are online. And there are clear rules like which names or which types of names our youth workers should use when they're going online. So
you can recognize them physically when they're doing work in neighborhoods. You can also recognize them online. It's branded. It's known that these are youth workers.
They often use their first name and then the name of the youth club where they are working.
Yeah. So also online, you really have to invest in building a level of trust, I can imagine.
Definitely. In most of the cases, the majority of people are people the youth workers also know offline. So it's the visitors of the centers and the friends. But generally, I would say far more than 50% of the regular online contacts are young people we also know offline in our case.
So it's really mirroring that offline quotation marks work.
And it's also used for promotion, of course, of youth center activities.
Do you also do more one-on-one work online, or is that more offline?
It's both. I would definitely say we do more offline one-on-one work for sure. But we're counting the online contacts also. So for years now we have statistics how it has developed. And for example, for the counting, the rule goes that an online contact is only counted if there's a vice versa communication. It would be that, hey, where are you? Tonight we have a special evening on women's rights, because it's the 8th of March. And then someone comments in maybe a provoking way. And then you react to the comment. And that starts a vice versa communication.
So it's more about like meaningful conversations as opposed to just broadcasting. Yeah. And what kind of platforms do you use to reach out to these youth? Are you really on the new, fresh, trendy platforms as well?
I would say every team has at least one account on Instagram. Most of the teams have TikTok. A lot still have Facebook, but this is not for communication with the youngsters anymore. It's more a kind of networking thing among the professionals.
So was it difficult for youth workers to adopt this way of working? I can imagine that maybe in Vienna you're a bit more better positioned to try these relatively new things, again, quotation marks. But I can also imagine that different countries, that there's a bit more of a bump, a threshold to adopt online youth work as well. Maybe because of regulations, but also because they're not really into tech or social media themselves necessarily.
One important point for sure is that compared to other European countries or compared to other cities, even within Austria, in Vienna, for youth work, we have a very good financial base and support from the municipality. In terms of training for youth workers is very well established in Austria, but specifically in Vienna. Therefore, this could be kind of easily included. Some youth workers did not like to adapt or still haven't yet adapted. But from the learnings of the pandemic 2022, so almost 2 years ago, it got obligatory that every of our youth workers has a smartphone. And it's mainly to do online youth work. The main idea was that every youth worker has to be equipped for online work.
And do they also get like an amount of hours to do that in their day-to-day?
It's on the responsibility of the respective director of the unit to organize that. But by the nature of online work, it's a bit challenging to fix that. My online doesn't work like that.
No, of course not.
The more challenging thing is even vice versa, that, for example, one of the rules is that if you leave the center, so if the job is done for you that day, you have to leave your work smartphone at the center locked, and you should not take it with you to stop you from continuing. One of the traps of online is you get too much into it, also as a practitioner.
I can imagine. But, on the other hand, it's also an opportunity to reach out to people you can't reach out during, work hours.
One of the main learnings we did was that you can really take a lot of parallels from offline work to online work.
I feel like there's also a bit of I don't know how to phrase this, a misalignment between offline and online work. From my experience talking to many youth workers in my profession, it's often local, right? It's hyper local. You're paid for by the organization that works in a city or maybe even a neighborhood. But the online world works slightly different. Like there are no working hours in the online world. There's no 9-to-5 mentality. But also it expands beyond the boundaries of a city or a neighborhood. So how do you look at these issues, but maybe also opportunities for more online youth work?
This is exactly one of the challenges that no one so far dared to take and do something about, at least in our practice. We are thinking about that. We are financed by the municipality. If we would come up with, and we thought about that, with a pure online youth work unit, then the reaction would be, yeah, but we want to spend the money for the young people of our municipality. And if you go more deeper into that, into the big thing somewhat, how could you guarantee that? And that's, I think, one of the reasons why so few practice actually exists for that. So we are still on this kind of local, regional level, as I said, with those youngsters, still also having PCVE elements in it, because one thing that sometimes happens is that you see youngsters posting symbols like the ISIS flag.
Yeah,
So,
like symbols you don't want to see.
Or some symbols of grey wolves, whatever. There's a very strict law about that in Austria. There's a list of symbols that are forbidden to show in public. And posting it on the internet is showing on public. You easily can get to jail for just posting the ISIS flag, even sharing it in a WhatsApp group. So at the point when you see one of the youngsters is showing one of those set of symbols, you need to do something. Then comes the question, what would you do when he comes to the youth club and he's wearing a jacket with that, or he's somehow showing up the symbol? You would approach him and you would try to talk with him about that, and you would try to explain him the legal consequences.
Yeah, of course.
The other thing to talk about is figuring out what is the mindset of the person that makes him using the symbol. Is it provocation? Is it deep ideology? What is in the rarest cases? So that's a parallel. And in what we're trying to do also in those cases, if we know the person, is try to get the communication away from the online. At least asking him, more him than her actually, call us or you come to the center and let's talk there. That's the part. But still we are far away from what you were starting with, like doing this general thing, which would also need other techniques.
With the online world, it's just as easy to communicate with a kid from the other side of the country as someone who lives next to you. So it feels like there's some kind of misalignment there.
Yeah.
So in your, maybe even in your dreams, what would online youth work look like with these, possibilities of working online without geographical limitations, maybe even without physical limitations?
I honestly could not tell you how it finally would look like. I would like to have the resources to get together a team of 8, 9, 10 people dedicated to this task and just try to figure out what works. You need several different people specialized on different platforms. If you include gaming, you need to have some expertise. Also, as a youth worker in the youth center, you need to get some credibility for the youngsters.
Exactly.
You must be worth something for them as a youth worker offline, and it's the same online.
What do you mean by that? It's like you need to be added value, or in what sense worth something?
Yes, as a different type, you're a different type of adult for the youngsters compared to all the other adults they knew before.
Mm-hmm.
You're not parent, you're not teacher, you're not friend, you're not uncle. You're a type of adult which has a specific role for young people, has a specific education to fulfill that role, and is in a way of communication with you when no one else is, because there's no hierarchy between you as a youth worker and the youngster actually. And you only can be a good youth worker if you're honestly interested in the person you're working with. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, your youth work won't work anyway. But that's youth work in general, and you have to adapt that to online.
So it feels like that's a little bit of the recipe for successful online youth work as well.
As a person, if you're not seriously, honestly interested in gaming and the game you're working at, you will fail. For sure. This is something I could predict. You need to have some interest in the gaming world of those youngsters, and then you might succeed in getting into relationships you didn't have before. But you need to be an expert on that, and that needs a lot of resources because it's so different. I would not be the person for that because it's not my thing, honestly. And I could do other things, but not for gaming. So I would have to look for a team for that.
And that's really that argument of credibility as well, right?
Yeah.
You need to be, a credible voice on those platforms as well. So does that mean that, when you're recruiting new youth workers, for example, that you also create a different profile? I can imagine that you're looking for maybe younger people to do this work who have grown up using this technology and also have that credibility already. So do you feel like the profile of a youth worker is changing along with this development of technology?
As I said before, a youth worker has to be generally interested in young people and in the world of the young people he is working with. As social networking is a really important part of all the young people we're working with, if you're not interested in that, you're not the right person for the job nowadays. So I have an understanding for older colleagues who do not like to use the smartphone on the job that much. For someone who would start new on the job with us now, I would recommend it's obligatory. And usually that works. And often it's more challenging to keep people back and reflect on your own type of use of social networking and make your breaks and rather try not to get into that trap, because it's a trap, definitely.
And looking ahead, we spoke about tech being constantly in development. What kind of opportunities do you see on the horizon? I can imagine that maybe virtual reality, but also the impact of AI will play a role in youth work. What kind of trends are you seeing?
We have one or two colleagues who are luckily interested in that. I see a lot of dangers, of course. With AI, everyone sees a lot of new, brilliant fake news, fake messages, and no one can really quickly check out true or false. But maybe the technique, maybe I'm wrong, and that the other technique on the other side to do the checks develops in the same way. What some creative colleagues already trying to do is to use it for kind of arts thing, changing or developing pictures, changing photos with AI as a fun thing with young people also. So there are some possibilities when it comes to creativity.
But I can imagine that you want to stay on top of these trends and developments, right? Because young people are definitely interested in these new technologies. So how do you make sure that you're on top of it?
Keep being interested, keep being open, but also keep being reflected. Though I'm generally an optimistic person, I try to keep my doubts And that's something I would recommend to everyone else also, specifically with these developments.
So a bit of distance, a bit of perspective is important to keep.
Not turn around from it, definitely. You have to work with it. Keep trainings on media literacy going, which is one of the most important parts, and add all these AI components to it.
And what kind of advice do you have for practitioners who maybe have a little bit of cold feet to go into these online communities?
Be aware that on first hand it's anonymous. Even if you declare yourself by first name, like we do it, by first name or name of the youth work unit, I think it's easy to get in. If you are not that active, to get in and look around. From my point of view, there's no danger in that. If you just check out how profiles of people look like, maybe even in one or the other discussion group that accepts you, if it's a group which is not open totally anyway. So checking things out is, from my point of view, it's an easy and non-risky game.
Just a little bit of curiosity.
Yeah.
And this brings me to my final question. Do you have any place where practitioners can go for additional information on your model or your approach to online youth work?
That's a pretty good question, and that brings me to a deficit we have, because so far we have not even published it. Yes, we have published its research report, but that was 2010.
Probably a little bit outdated.
For fun reasons, you might read it. And for now, you can check in German our annual reports, where we also reporting about the online activities, definitely. What we have and what we can offer, we even have that in English. We have social media guidelines. We have the guidelines how the youth workers should act when it comes to online youth work on social media or in social networking.
Where can we find that?
On request.
On request. So they need to reach out to you, and I'm sure the people at RAN will.
And there's even an English version available on that.
That sounds perfect. And that wraps it up for now, I think. I'd like to thank my guest, Werner Prinzjakowitsch, for taking the time to talk to me today. Thank you, Werner.
Thank you for inviting me.
And finally, a big thank you to all of our listeners. And I do hope you can join me next time for the next episode of the RAN in Focus podcast, brought to you by RAN practitioners. Goodbye for now.